So good to see you all. Michael, as we start, do you mind introducing Brett and Jason?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Misha. This is great. We're excited to jump in here. First, your audience has heard me blab around for a year plus, so I thought it would be really cool to get my two unsung heroes, two of the founders of Hitch Partners, Brett Starr and Jason Owens. Brett is based out of the Austin area. We're not exactly sure where Jason's based, but right now he's sitting in Malaysia. So we're excited to have them on, and they're really the two architects of our really exciting compensation survey. So I'm going to let them do most of the talking today, and I'll interject wherever I can. So
Certainly. Well, Jason, Brett, welcome to the show. And as we start, what was the most surprising or shocking finding of the report?
Yeah, thanks, Misha, for having us. To me, executive protection. Executive protection is moving in the right direction, but about a third of public company CISOs, or maybe even more, don't have any protection in place. Like, to me, it's up big time from last year, which is great. I mean, it was actually less than half public company CISOs had protection in place for the D&O policy. But this year there's still a long way to go. And for private companies, it's worse. It's still under 50%.
yeah.
So that was when you say protection, you mean coverage under the D&O policy.
That's correct. Or indemnification.
Yeah, that's a point. Sorry, I'll interject here. Like, remember, I've told this to the audience before. The D&O policy is a Band-Aid, right? The true protection is indemnification, on which not many have it, right? It's a much more common area, especially if you're in public service and the government positions, and also in Europe in some areas. But here in the U.S., the average CISO, public or private company, does not have full indemnification, and so D&O is the backstop. I've talked about this a lot with Joe Sullivan, and by the way, D&O doesn't always include everything, right? Everyone's D&O policies are different. But even the lowest common factor of protecting CISOs, to Brett's point, and what we saw in the survey, was pretty shocking, right? As far as, I mean, we're getting there, but we're still far away from the goal. So just wanted to make that point.
So the shocking part is that 70%, it sounds like, are not covered by D&O, but really should be.
So no, 67% were actually covered this year, which is great.
67% are covered,
which is great. But again, that's up from like 40-something% last year. But again, there's still 33% that are not covered. And again, this is just shocking, right?
And how broad was the sample? I would imagine probably if it's a public company, if it's financial services or healthcare heavily regulated, or if it's an enterprise, a level organization with a lot of customers where it's like the stakes are high, I would imagine that it's more important. The chips are bigger, so there's a lot organizations that will more to lose. Therefore, CISOs are tasked with protecting crown jewels that much more important, versus if it's a small 10-person nonprofit or what have you. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the breadth of the sample, those 33% that are not covered, is it just an admission on their part, where they really should go to their CEO and the board and just say, hey, listen, it's I'm taking personal risks that I really should not be, and this needs to be addressed? Or is it really you would argue that it's the organization is of such size where it may not the exposure is not as large as, I know, publicly traded bank or something?
So I mean, we had 500 plus security leaders participated in our survey. That's a pretty decent sample size. Probably about half of them came from public companies, half of them came from private companies, roughly. Mm-hmm. Right? We have data on kind of who participated in the survey. So this is a pretty big cross sample. The public company thing really bothers me. The two most famous folks that are kind of being pursued, SolarWinds and Uber, they're very different types of businesses, right? One one or the other, you might think, well, no, nothing's going to happen to me in this particular case, but you can kind of see where this could go. Especially if you're a public company CISO. Private companies, you might have a little bit more flexibility, but I don't want to see any CISOs, getting Wells notices for just doing their job.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. No, it makes perfect sense. I think just having this conversation brings awareness, and if we get 5 people to start wondering whether they're protected or not, and raising that question with their general counsel and CEO and the board, I think I feel my job is done. So, but it's certainly worthwhile to have this conversation. What were other findings that surprised you, Jason? What was there that kind of caught your eye?
One of the most interesting things for me that popped up was around reporting structure. That's something that we continue to see evolve, but the reporting structure is really dispersed across the C-suite. For the most part, it is kind of starting to consolidate around a couple of titles, but no position has more than 30% reporting to him or her, throughout the organization. When you're looking at, public companies, it's kind of starting to consolidate around the CTO or the CIO. With private companies, it's more consolidating around the CEO or the CTO. But it really gets interesting when you look at company size. And there you kind of see the disparity where with CIOs, there's kind of a positive correlation. So as the company size increases, you see the reporting to the CIO go up. If you're looking at companies with less than 250 employees, the reporting to the CIO is down around 2%. If you look at companies above 5,000 employees, it's closer to 40%. Whereas the CEO is kind of the inverse. If you look at smaller companies, less than 250, reporting to the CEO is around 34% or so. And as the company matures and becomes larger, you see that statistic kind of come down. So we're starting to see some consolidation there, but it's something that's been evolving over time. There was a large decrease, especially among public companies, shifting away from the CIO, but it's still one of the most kind of common reporting structures that we see within publicly held companies. So we'll continue to watch that, but seeing the kind of trend and seeing where the reporting structure is moving to was something that definitely popped up and was interesting to me, especially when you're looking at company size and trying to find out. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you saw this, but there was a report by Splunk
alongside
the reporting structure, and people questioned their findings because they said it was the number of CISOs reporting to the CEO seemed to be too high, and people kind of questioned the methods or the sample size. So it's certainly good to have an alternative view and kind of backed by a larger sample size.
Yeah, I mean, in their fairness, I think they kind of corrected and said there was a certain sample size or company size that they were looking at for that stat, and it got pulled out. Not that it was out of context or anything, but I think it's just hard. I mean, when we can go straight to the source, and these are CISOs that trust us, and the data that comes in non-anonymized, it goes out anonymized, right? So there's no in between there. We have no motivation to take outside influence. There's no sales motivation here. We just want to get the right data in front of the right people so they can make informed decisions and they can ensure having a market offer and protection. And that's literally what we tried to do from the very beginning. We needed this data when we first started because a lot of our clients were using Wrongford. That's Radford for us. And so we just we thought that it would be a great tool, and we're just super humbled that so many people use it in that capacity. So
great.
Yeah, one last thing on reporting structure. It's always been a concern. As a matter of fact, when we came out with the first survey, we really needed compensation data because none existed for these. But we also wanted to do something with that, and reporting structure and kind of what functions were owned by the CISO, particularly IT, were something that came up again and again in the community. So reporting structure is something we reported on for probably 8 years. And I mean, the change from year to year is not that great, if you look at, it, but it still doesn't really have a home,
Mm.
which just kind of speaks to the evolution of the function.
Certainly. And double clicking on the compensation question. Well, the world changed from 3 years ago when money was free and VCs were throwing tons of cash at cybersecurity companies, and corporates were flush with budgets and they were willing to try a lot of different things. It seems the pendulum has shifted, and now it's what 10-year treasury is, what, 4.5%, sometimes
Right.
getting close to 5%. So that has thrown a lot of cold water across the entire stack, from cybersecurity companies to cybersecurity programs. And I wonder, because I hear kind of rumors that often organizations are looking at their org structure and starting to question, well, we're paying the CISO top dollar, maybe we can get by with a virtual CISO or go MSSP route. I wonder if you're seeing on the compensation ranges versus 3 years ago. Are they depressed? Are they trending up? What sense did you get from the results of the survey?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is another thing that was kind of surprising to us, is that the compensation kind of held steady and even went up.
Mm.
Amongst public company CISOs, for instance, this is probably one of the first data points in the survey. It went up, almost 10%, and then private company went up slightly, like about 4%, which I was surprised. I thought it was going to go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
From year to year, just given kind of the amount of CISOs that are unemployed and were calling us for the last years. Now, correlated to that, another surprising thing was the average tenure in the current role went up from 34 months to 39 months, which again, that's pretty crazy for us. I think it speaks to a couple of things. Number one, I think CISOs have seen their colleagues be out of work for quite a while, so they're thinking twice about leaving. I also think grass is not always greener on the other side. When it comes to that, and they knew that they would be out of work potentially for a while. Like they would see a colleague leave and then not get a role for 6 or 8 or 9 months. Before that. So I think those two things were pretty surprising to us, just kind of given the state of the economy.
Well, that's good news, right? If tenure is increasing and the salary ranges are going up, that's good news. But
Yeah,
on the I don't know if it was part of the survey, Jason. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but we talk to CISOs, and sometimes they are surprised that a job search that they thought would take 3 months is taking 9 months plus, sometimes even longer. Are you seeing the light in the end of the tunnel? Do you think this overabundance of CISOs looking for CISO positions versus open positions, is it something that you see will get recalibrated and this year maybe?
Well, Brett and Michael would definitely have a better handle on the breadth and kind of pipeline of the search links. But the two caveats I would just want to circle back around tenure and compensation is a large part of that compensation increase was due to equity valuations, with the market doing well this year. Especially the information security sector being up, 33-34% on average. We saw that a large part of the growth in average compensation year to year was due to that equity valuation. If you just looked at cash on cash, it's a much kind of tighter 2%, 3% increase there. And then with tenure, the one kind of disparity or difference there is that we see that the average current tenure for CISOs at companies with less than 250 employees is substantially lower, below the average than the rest of their cohorts. There's a variety of probably anecdotal reasons which Brett and Michael can speak to, but as a data nerd, that kind of screamed at me and said, okay, there's something there. I might not know the reason why, but there's definitely kind of a flag raised on the play. But as far as how long the searches are taking and the difference in the cadence there, I would definitely kind of defer to Michael and Brett on that one.
Interesting point. Interesting point.
On the tenure, there's two things going on there. Number one, public companies have a much better handle on kind of what the role is now versus say 5 years ago. So I think they've kind of seen their colleagues or their and companies have hired this role and have a much better handle. We find that when we're interviewing the interviewers, that process where when we kick off a search, we meet all the executives and try to gain alignment as to what the priorities are for the requirements and the understanding of what the requirements are. It's a lot better than it was, say, 5 years ago for that. So there's way more alignment even when you start a search. So now the expectation of an incoming CISO can be set much, much better. And you're getting the right CISO more often than not in the smaller companies, the CISO that you get at 250 is probably not the CISO that you're going to get when you're trying to prepare to go public. Like that's just probably not. It's not the same person in all likelihood, right? So there we would expect the tenures to be a little bit lower, but also the calibration and the expertise at the companies to understand what good looks like at that company size. It's just probably not there. As well. So in a lot of cases, they're probably hiring the wrong person.
Certainly.
Yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
One more data point there. Where are most of the CISOs seeing their opportunities coming from right now? Postings. They're coming from postings. I hear it every day. I just heard it on my last 3 calls, the number of people that were applying to posting. Look, it's necessary. We get that. We totally get that. Our positions aren't posted. They're all private searches. They're all retained. But we get that there's a ton of postings right now. If you're going to post a search, there's some major enterprise companies that are posting their CISO search out there. Do not expect that their compensation range is going to be at market. Do not expect it. They are woefully low. And if that's the data source you're getting it from, they're just not going to be market offers. And that's just the fact. If you're getting a position that's posted on LinkedIn or elsewhere, it's just not going to be. So to the candidate experience, it seems like comp is going down. It is not the case. So it's, I think to educate I just did I was at ISLF got invited to speak on Friday. It was an amazing group, 100 or so folks. And that question came up and I was like, look, there's an entirely new category of company, the AI companies, the companies that really haven't paid attention to security. They could be 75 years old and they're looking at their first CISO. These companies are not going to be at market level. They're graduating into needing this position for the first time. It's an education process. They're posting their roles for many of them. And so that's just the reality of it. So I would just warn the audience that when you think that it's not a Chicken Little situation, comp is not going down. We assure you of that. Believe me, we'll be the first ones to raise the flag if it is, right? You'll see our fees and everything else change. Like it's just not happening. And by the way, we're on a flat fee, so it doesn't.
But to that point, price discovery happens on the edges. So if the company is posting a role because they don't know any better what the market price is, and someone has been out of job for 9 months, they may compromise on something that they don't have to.
We understand that, and look, the other thing is CISOs. I've said this before. They're not so bueno at looking for jobs. This is a big leap for them. This is not a muscle they've been able to really work out too much, right? So they should be bad at looking for jobs. This is not something they've been great at for 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
What I would say is that we really need to keep that in perspective as well, because a lot of them don't ask about comp up front. They wait till the end. It's not a natural muscle to ask for it. We always teach people, like, ask early and often, make sure you're not wasting your time. Try to turn it into a consulting opportunity if it's way too low, just anything, but don't be surprised if it's not a market level. I've had so many conversations over the last couple of months where it's like, I went through seven discussions or 3 rounds of discussions and came back and they were a couple $100,000 off the mark. And I'm like, that should never happen.
This should
Like
be
that should
question
be
number
on
one.
here.
Well, as we joke every time we talk, we joke that if you've been married for 20 years, you can be expected to be good at dating.
No, we should all not be expected to be good at
On,
dating.
on that note, for someone who is getting ready to start dating again, if someone is looking for a new position, whether 6 months or 8 months time, based on the results of the survey, what would be your advice to those CISOs who are just starting on a journey? What are 2, 3 things they should focus on?
Leverage your network.
Yeah.
I mean that CISOs are great at referring other CISOs to roles. Whether or not they're a match for those roles, that's another story. But leverage your network. If you're looking to leave, I think you need to have a really, really crisp idea as to the types of companies and the types of roles that you're open to, and then start to network into those target companies. I think the more specific you can be, the better off you're going to be. But then you have to really leverage your contacts. Applying for a role will do you no good. Literally, every posting probably has 300-400 people, and the recruiting team can't sift through the noise.
If there is a recruiting team.
Yeah. But plus, you also need some actual data or some humans that are actually at the company that you're targeting to kind of find out what's really going on. As you know, CISOs get things done through influence, and if the company doesn't have a mentality that security is very important, you're not going to be successful there anyway. So
you need to have a champion inside the company who would promote your candidacy, I guess.
Yeah. I think the other one, which we've talked about ad nauseum on other episodes, is about having a very acute, focused superpower, and to be able to talk about it and to be able to build artifacts around it. The CISOs that are trying to be everything for everyone and shift their resume and their storyline so that it meets everyone is exactly the problem, right? You're feeding into the system. It's why resumes don't work. Resumes are a static storytelling artifact. They are not a dynamic storytelling part. You have to hope that the person is wise enough and mature enough to work through your resume and say, oh, that piece of Jason's or that piece of Brett's is exactly what we need and where we're going. And you just can't count on that. So that's why we don't use resumes. They feed into a broken system. So I think the focus around building a brand, a very acute brand, so that people will understand that you're a thought leader in one thing, is a natural, comfortable movement into being a leader and a thought leader in other things, is a really good strategy, and we've seen it work really well. Yeah,
So it's kind of
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
You need to think of yourself as a scalpel, not as a Swiss Army knife.
Beautiful. Or a butter knife.
Well, hopefully not.
We need more scalpels and less butter knives. So yeah.
Yeah, so. There you go. I think this one beat will get clipped and promoted on LinkedIn so much. Awesome. Well, other than sharing the findings with the Affinia community, what else can we do to help the cause?
I'm curious, Jason, Brett, like, is there anything else that was really surprising or kind of interesting? I know we also did, I'll pat ourselves. We did the first ever gender gap analysis too, which we thought was really important. I don't know if we want to talk about that. For us, that was critical because we focused so much on trying to raise up the pool of diversity candidates, regardless of where the winds are blowing in our nation. We think it's extremely important. So I don't know if you have other things you want to talk about too, Jason and Brett. I wanted to.
I would say, Jason, we did a fair amount of work kind of in this category. This is super important to us. It's been important to us since we started the firm. So Jason, why don't you kick that off, and I can jump in on other stuff.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the first part first. Around gender comparison, we did look at the differences in compensation. And on par, we found pretty similar findings to the recent Pew Research findings around women's earnings relative to men's earnings. In publicly traded companies, sadly or expectedly, women were earning 92%, 92 cents, I guess, on the dollar compared to their male counterparts. However, when looking at privately held companies, that drops down to 83%.
Oh wow.
So there's a wide disparity there. We're going to probably continue to watch that figure. But that raised some alarms for us as far as the disparity in compensation there. And it's across, total compensation. So when looking at base, bonus, and equity together, those kind of disparities jumped out. Another thing that was interesting on the diversity front was looking at the kind of, I guess, overall importance of diversity to the organization. Obviously, at Hitch, we're trying to field the best person for the job. That's the main goal. But diversity makes good business sense. There was a recent McKinsey study that looked at 1,000 companies across 12 different countries and found that those that were in the upper quartile of diversity representation within the C-suite were 34% more likely to be above their counterparts in profitability. So in that sense, diversity makes good business sense. That's something that we pay attention to at Hitch because we're trying to, not only field the right candidate, but help the business and the company at large. So that's something that we pay attention to. We kind of make sure that relevant candidates within that category are part of the process. If you looked at kind of our network as a whole, just to kind of give you some representative sample there, probably 17% or so of our network is in an identifiable diverse category. If you layer on top of that and look at a little bit deeper specific industries that are the high value targets, health tech, fintech, banking, biotech, cloud infrastructure, those types of industries, and diverse, it drops down to 4% or so diverse representation. And if you layer even further on that technical skills, so coming from a comp sci background, having AppSec or ProdSec expertise, that number drops significantly down to less than 1%. So there's a real opportunity there to kind of, develop that expertise or that kind of technical focus within the diverse community. But we understand that, like I said, it makes good business sense. So it's something that we pay attention to. But getting more representation within the community is something that that I think would help overall reach the business goals.
Actually, I'm quite shocked that the discrepancy in compensation is so large. But also, I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the FINIA, and we don't have very kind of hard stats, but I know that less than 20% of our members, of 2,000 members, are women, and we're trying to drive this up, and we figure out ways to kind of to improve that. It's certainly very far from parity. It's certainly something that it's a worthy cause for us to look at, and even raising awareness among decision makers, among organizations. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. I know we're coming up on time a little bit. This was awesome, Jason, Brett, Michael. We'll definitely be sharing the findings with our community in our CISO Wire. Going forward, I look forward to kind of exploring ways how maybe you can leverage a FINIA community in helping produce the data for the survey, maybe for the upcoming year. And again, thank you so much for your time. Every time we meet, I learn something, and judging by the number of views and number of downloads on YouTube and on the podcast, you continue to be rock stars, and it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Misha.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Misha.
Awesome.